What's up, guys? So, today is the last race of the year, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about a dilemma that I find myself in. Today, I don't really have a rooting interest in terms of the four guys, in the championship. At best, I'm sort of rooting for anyone but Kyle Busch. As long as he doesn't win, I think I'll be happy. If he wins, it's going to suck for me. I know a lot of you guys are Kyle Busch fans. But other than having a rooting interest against somebody, I don't have much of a rooting interest. Now, since McMurray retired, I haven't really had a hardcore favorite driver, but my two favorites right now have been Bubba Wallace and Daniel Suarez. I like them. I like their personality. I like this. There's a lot of intangibles that go into me rooting for somebody, and it's usually not related to whether or not they're actually winning races. I just find myself, it's just hard for me to root for people that are already successful or teams that are already like I don't jump the band on a bandwagon, so to speak. Like just, oh look, this guy wins a lot, I'm gonna root for them. I can't be that guy. I don't know what it is. I've always been that way, and throughout my life, I've always rooted for underdogs, and it's not something I do purposely. It just works out that way, and I think it has a lot to do with because I don't know what it is. I just have to like somebody or a team or something for some other odd reason, and then I just gravitate towards them and I become a fan. And it doesn't usually correlate with success. The only the only rooting interest I've had in my life that has consistently won is the New York Yankees in baseball. Other than that, if you look at every other uh, team or athlete, it's usually been an underdog. So when you look at basketball, so to speak, I grew up rooting for the Portland Trailblazers. So a lot of times people say to me, "How the hell did you get to become a fan or root for teams or athletes that play in cities outside of New York?" Well, because I'm not somebody who just roots for a team because it's from where I'm from or where I live. That's not what drives me. So it's weird. I can't really list all the reasons why I like a certain team or athlete, but I grew up rooting for the Trailblazers because I've always been a Clyde Drexler fan. Uh, he was he's my all-time favorite basketball player, and I remember him at the University of Houston when they had the team known as Phi Slamma Jamma. A lot of you guys who are a lot younger than me don't probably have no clue what I'm talking about, but in the early '80s, uh, the Houston Cougars, University of Houston, they were championship caliber teams. They had a Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler and Larry Mishaw, a bunch of guys. It was a high flying, fast paced, fast break team, lots of dunks, which is why they were known as Phi Slamma Jamma. So upon leaving college, being drafted into the Portland Trailblazers, I went with Clyde Drexler, and I've been a Portland Trailblazer fan since. Now, in recent years, not as hardcore as I used to be because the the teams from the late '80s into the '90s, that Portland Trailblazer team is my all-time favorite. And they had a great team. You had Terry Porter. You had a lot of great players. They were much like the Houston Cougars of the Phi Slamma Jamma team. They kind of had that similar personality. They were very high flying, fast paced, fast break type of team led by Clyde Drexler. And he was just fun to watch, extremely talented, athletic, um, and in many ways was compared to Michael Jordan throughout his career. So, you know, I gravitated to the Portland Trailblazers. Now, today, I'm not as hardcore a fan of Portland as I was. Um, I like the Nets, the Brooklyn Nets. I sort of. But then you look at football, and I grew up, you know, following and rooting for the Houston Oilers. That was my favorite team. I remember when they had Texas Rose. Oh my God, why am I? I'm sorry, I'm hitting a wall right now. But Earl Campbell, and of course Warren Moon. My favorite. He was my favorite football player of all time, and I loved watching that high-powered offense, the Houston Oilers, and the run and shoot. And so I always rooted for them. So when Warren Moon left, and in came McNair, Steve McNair, and you had that they moved to Tennessee. I continued rooting for the Titans, and they are my favorite football team. But once again, people are like, "Oh, you root for the Titans? Why? You're from New York." You know, I don't automatically just root for regional teams like that. So when you look at NASCAR, again, I don't know what it is. I liked Jamie McMurray from the moment, he started, and I always rooted for him. But, I've had this bad luck, or it just seems like I'm always rooting for these guys that never win or rarely win and don't have that ability or opportunity to be a champion. And it's not something I do on purpose. It just seems to work out that way. And I can't figure it out, but I can't just look at guys like Kyle Busch or Jimmy Johnson or these guys and just say, hey, I'm going to root for these guys. They win a lot. I'm not built that way. And so I always rooted for Jamie McMurray. And when he went to Roush Racing, in the beginning, I was kind of excited because at the time Roush was the top organization. But when he went there, he was a fifth car. And it didn't take me long to realize this experiment's not going to end well, because when you got so many cars, there's always going to be an odd man out. And he never really seemed to have had that push. Like, they had Edwards, they had Kenseth, they had Biffle. So McMurray was sort of that extra wheel, and he was never able to really do much there. So I had to struggle through those years rooting for somebody that really did not have that opportunity. And so now he's out of the sport, and the only guys I really like, as rooting interests are Daniel Suarez and Bubba Wallace. But as you could see, the predicament that I've been in, Suarez, unfortunately, hasn't been able to piece together enough success to keep him around. He's now out at Stewart-Haas. And I know there's a lot of people that say, well, he had a couple years at Gibbs and 1 year at Stewart-Haas Racing. He didn't do anything. So be it. You're out. Personally, I honestly think that he's not as bad as people think he is. I think he's shown moments of ability this year. Even this year's been really inconsistent. And even in races where he finished all the way in the back, he had really good runs. So he's shown moments where, yeah, he can wheel a race car. I don't know, man. It's tough. He's on a 4-car organization. Yeah, I know I'm making excuses, but these guys don't have the opportunity that they used to have many years ago. A lot of times, drivers were given much more time to develop, or to really show what they can do. Now it's like you're in, you get a year or two or whatever the case is, and if you're not winning consistently, and there's always some new 18-year-old, 19-year-old in Xfinity or trucks that everyone's talking about, and they're ready to jump in your seat. And that's what happened. Now Cole Custer's going to get his ride, and he's out. So I don't. It sucks because NASCAR's my favorite sport. I love NASCAR, and it's hard because when you don't have a rooting interest, it takes a lot out of any sport. You know, it's one thing to sit and watch a game or a race or something and enjoy it for what it is without having a rooting interest. That really makes all the difference. And, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with Suarez. He'll probably end up on a lower tier team. If Aris follows him or gives him support, he'll end up on some mid-tier team. So I'll still root for the guy, but it's gonna be hard because it's gonna be tough watching people that you root for struggle. Just like with Bubba Wallace, you know, I'm a big fan. Not only of Wallace, but I've always been a Richard Petty fan. That iconic 43 car, I've always liked that organization. And once again, you see, I'm rooting for teams and drivers that they're not going to have a chance to really compete. And it sucks, but I can't help myself. I can't just say, well, I'm not going to like this guy or root for this guy anymore, and I'm going to go start rooting for Denny Hamlin or Kyle Busch. I can't do that. So I guess it's just something that's always been this way with me. I end up rooting for lost causes. And I remember that the Houston Oilers, they got close to winning a championship. They should have won at least 2 Super Bowls. And I remember watching them lose that heartbreaking game to the Buffalo Bills and Frank Reich and that comeback. And they had I think it was a 35-3 lead at halftime. I don't remember exactly, but they lost that game. And it was like everything collapsed after that. And it was like, I can't believe it. This team should have gone to the Super Bowl. They should have a couple of Super Bowl rings. Didn't happen. So I I've always gotten to that point where there's a chance that you're going to win it all, and it doesn't happen. Same thing happened with the Trailblazers. They went to a couple of finals. They weren't able to pull it off. Now, Drexler was able to go to the Houston Rockets and they actually got to a Super Bowl with Steve McNair, and they were literally a yard away from winning a Super Bowl. I think it was against the Rams. Again, heartbreaking loss. Just got this close and couldn't pull it off. So, why am I fucking doomed to this shit? It sucks, but I keep thinking, if I ever do, get to experience that euphoria of winning it all as a fan, that I think it'll be that much sweeter. And I have experienced that with the Yankees, but the Yankees have always been a winning organization. So outside of the Yankees is where, it's tough. So now, looking at next year, it's going to be rough. Because I do like Kyle Larson. There are drivers I kind of like, I don't mind. I do like Chip Ganassi, the team. So I could, those guys will be contending, but I'm not hardcore. They didn't win me over. I kind of grew to like Kurt Busch. I hated him almost as much as Kyle Busch when he was at Roush. But after, he went through a lot of shit, and it's, you kind of want to root for people to kind of turn things around, and I think he's kind of won me over. Not as a hardcore fan, but I can root for the guy. Um, and watching him drive that number one car for Chip Ganassi, because I like Ganassi, I could root for Kurt Busch. But he's not, I'm not a hardcore fan. Same thing with Kyle Larson. I like Kyle Larson. I like that 42 car. I used to root when Jamie McMurray drove that 42, and it was the Texaco Havoline. So there's little connections of why I like Ganassi Racing and things like that. But I can't call myself a hardcore fan. The I did root for Suarez and Bubba Wallace, and I would say those are my top guys as far as people I like. But what's going to happen? Suarez is going to be driving, if he's still in Cup. We don't even know if he's going to be in Cup. But chances are he'll land at a lower tier team. Now, best case scenario for me would be if he went to Richard Petty Motorsports and they had a second car. For a couple reasons. One, I could root for my two favorite drivers on the same team and sort of helping each other and try to get that organization where it needs to be. Also, I do think Richard Petty Motorsports as a one-car organization is never, ever going to be competitive. They've been struggling for so long. They desperately need the advantage of having a multi-car team. Now, obviously, anything more than two cars is too much. But I think a two-car team could sort of play off each other, where they can learn off each other, and I'd like to see that. And maybe with the Aris money coming in, they can go to have a second car, and maybe having more heads, at the table, they can elevate that organization. I don't know. I'm just thinking. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm just saying that if I had my pick, my wish, I would like to see something like that happen, rather than, let's say, him going to David Reagan's car or something like that. That's just, I don't know. It's going to suck. I'll still root for them. I'm still going to root for Bubba Wallace, and hopefully, that organization doesn't experience a big change where they get rid of Bubba Wallace or anything like that. That would suck. But I want to know from you guys. I mean, are you in a similar predicament? I know a lot of you guys do have favorite drivers that do win. Like I said, Kyle Busch, Hamlin, all these guys at the top, Harvick, Truex. So you got your rooting interests, and you get to experience being in that run. But are any of you guys in that same predicament where your favorite drivers are people that they're not going to be competitive? And, it sucks. It's tough. But I'm curious to know. So I have no idea what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a long off season. I'm curious to know what's going to happen with Suarez and with also with that 43 car. What if any changes are going to come? But I'm in a bad spot, and it makes it harder to watch NASCAR when I don't have a hardcore rooting interest. So I hope that changes. Maybe somebody comes along that I could gravitate to and is actually in a position to win races and stuff like that. But I don't particularly care for any of these guys who do win regularly. I don't know. It's tough. So those are just some random thoughts that I wanted to put out there. Now that we're coming down to the championship, so let's see what happens today. I hope anybody but Kyle Busch winning. I guess if Kyle Busch wins, it's just gonna add a lot of salt to my wounds. But it is what it is. So those are my thoughts. I look forward to your comments. I'll see you guys around.